But one thing is there, Mr. Aiyar.
Yes,
We have been, I mean, I do not know, I did not interact when you were there in Delhi at that time. But
yes.
lately, now when I interact with the Panchayati Raj Ministry and um, Housing and Urban Administration, the response to this issue is not very encouraging. I don't know why. I don't know.
I think I know why, but I
Ah,
don't want to spoil the atmosphere of this meeting by coming to the root cause of what is going wrong.
ah.
But maybe you can guess from my position.
At least I understand your dialogue, but at least the things which are under in the constitutional provisions must be done. Why they can't be done?
Quite very good question.
Which are beyond. I mean, some people say कि it is a birth defect, but that cannot be set right now. But that requires much larger. But at least what is there in the constitution must be upheld. Mukulika has joined. Mukulika has joined. Mr. Sanjay Srivastava has joined. Hello, welcome, Sanjay ji. Sanjay.
Good afternoon and welcome to our distinguished speaker also and my colleagues.
Sanjay Srivastava is the State Election Commissioner for Delhi.
Achha.
Today we are undergoing a by-election in MCD also in Delhi.
Nagireddy ji. Hello, Nagireddy.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. We can hear you, but not see you.
Okay, I'll just start my video. Now, perhaps you can see me.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, sir. Yes, sir. And good afternoon, former Minister, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Mr. Aiyar.
Can you add a little more light to your face? Because it's very much in the dark.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yes, that's clearer.
Mr. Reddy is was a distinguished State Election Commissioner till a few months back. And he did an excellent job as election commissioner in Telangana.
I see.
Sir, what we did last in my tenure is that we organized a conclave of the state election commissioners at NIRD.
Yes.
And of course, we did not call it, we called it conclave, but then it all, I mean, its basis, its origin, its existence is all because of the 73 and 74th amendments.
Indeed.
So we had a 2-day conference, and I wish NIRD again, does this again, at least biennially or whatever it is.
Yes.
That was a wonderful meeting. That was a wonderful meeting. We should have actually invited you that time. Somehow we miss you.
But NIRD has the resources and can easily do so. But I found that they were not particularly enthusiastic about Panchayati Raj. They were my principal associates in the Aiyar committee on leveraging panchayats for the more effective delivery of public goods and services. But they didn't seem really enthusiastic about that job. Anyway, it was, in fact, at the NIRD in Hyderabad that Rajiv Gandhi finally determined on moving for constitutional amendments to bring in Panchayati Raj. I see that Mukulika is on the screen.
Mukulika, yes, she has joined.
My greetings to her. My greetings to her.
Greetings to you, Maniji. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank
Maniji,
you.
good afternoon. This is Ajit Ranade.
Namaskar, Mr. Ranade.
Hi,
good
namaskar.
To see you too.
Good, Mukulika. Good to see you.
Good. I've made very good progress with after our last conversation of bringing some academics on board. So hopefully we can do a meeting in a couple of weeks to join these two sets of expertise with everyone here and a small group of academics. So there is great enthusiasm.
Great,
Good,
lovely.
very good.
Good afternoon, Madam. Mridul here.
Hey, Madhu, are you better now?
Yeah, I'm good, Madam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mridul, I think we can.
Can we?
It's
Yes.
3:35. I think we should.
Yeah. We should begin with. So. Good afternoon to one and all present here. I welcome you all for this webinar series on local self-government. We've been inviting scholars and practitioners to speak on the most neglected third tier of government, that is the rural and urban local bodies. On behalf of ishad, that is International Society for Human Awakening and Development, a development's grassroots development project, I take this opportunity to welcome our distinguished guest, former Cabinet Minister, Sri Shankar Aiyar, who shall be speaking on strategies to meet expectations of 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment. Welcome, sir. I'm also pleased to welcome Mr. J.S. Saharia, former Chief Secretary of Maharashtra and former State Election Commissioner of Maharashtra and Chairman of ishad, who shall preside over today's deliberations. The program is supported by Association for Democratic Reforms, Resource and Support Center, Commonwealth, Local Self-Government Forum, and I'm also grateful to Max Maharashtra for streaming this program live on their channel. I'm also pleased to welcome Dr. Ajit Ranade, Mr. Bhim Raskar, Ms. Anuya Kuar, Professor Mukulika Banerjee from London School of Economics, Mr. Sanjay Srivastav, Mr. Nagi Reddy, election commissioners of respective states, who have been working relentlessly towards the reforms in local self-government in India and some of us, particularly in Maharashtra. In fact, a new yeah. After completion of 25 years of the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment, it is pertinent for us to revisit and take a stock of achievement and challenges that the Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies are facing in changing socio-economic scenario. Instances like seats of sarpanch being auctioned or panchayat bodies being formed with consensus, and or maybe we can say without elections, or the upper hand that the municipal commissioner generally has in urban local bodies, are some of these challenges that are faced today. Some meaningful interventions are in need of an hour, and with this view, ishad launched this grassroots democracy project. Our speaker for today shall delve into many of these kind of aspects, since he was looking after this particular body, and after meeting him, I'm sure, and I should vouch that he still looks at this particular body in a lot of, I should say that this is a very close to his heart subject, kind of subject. Now coming to the introduction of our esteemed guest, it is my privilege to introduce Mr. Shankar Aiyar. Mr. Aiyar attended the prestigious Doon School, later went to earn two degrees in economics, one from Delhi University and the other one from the University of Cambridge in 1963. In 1963, Mr. Aiyar entered the Indian Foreign Service, and over the next 15 years, he served at in various capacities and diplomatic postings, including a very important posting, and he was the first Consul General to Pakistan, occupying this particular seat after a very long time, once the relationship between both the countries were better. He remained there until 1982, and which time he returned to New Delhi to serve for the next year to serve as a joint secretary in national government's Ministry of External Affairs. The final portion of his foreign service, that is 1985 to 89, was also spent in New Delhi, where he was assigned to the office of his friend Rajiv Gandhi during most of Gandhi's term as a prime minister. Mr. Aiyar decided to retire from foreign service in 1989 to pursue his career in politics. As a member of Congress Party, he served as a special assistant to Mr. Gandhi, who was then the president of party until Gandhi's assassination in 1991. Mr. Aiyar ran for an elected office in 1991, where he won the seat from Lok Sabha from Tamil Nadu. In 2004, he joined the cabinet for a newly formed Congress UPA coalition government, where until 2009, he was the head of Panchayati Raj, the Minister of Overseeing Indian Systems of Panchayat, self-governing village councils. During his tenure in the UPA government, Aiyar also held other portfolios, important portfolios like Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Youth Affairs and Sports, and Development of Northeast region. In 2006, he was honored as the year's outstanding parliamentarian by the President of India. March 2010, however, he was nominated to Rajya Sabha by the President on the strength of his expertise in the field of social service and literary accomplishments. There he served as a standing committee on rural development and on the consultative committee on external affairs. He left the Rajya Sabha in 2016. During the long years of his public life, Mr. Aiyar developed reputation for being an avid orator, a prolific newspaper and journal columnist, and he has also authored some books like Remembering Rajiv, Confession of a Secular Fundamentalist, and A Time of Transition, Rajiv Gandhi to 21st Century. Before I proceed to Mr. Manishankar Aiyar's sir's talk, I request the chair, Shri J.S. Saharia sir, to make his introductory remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to Shri Manishankar Aiyar ji and all the participants in this webinar, which is on the very important subject of strategies to meet the expectations of 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments. As you are aware, local self-governments in our country and their elections have not been able to achieve the desired status, role, and dignity in terms of 73rd and 74th amendments, in spite of several efforts during the last 25 years due to a variety of reasons. These included lacuna in legal and or administrative structure, unwillingness on the part of the government to devolve funds, functions, and functionaries to the local governments, and to a certain extent, failure of the local governments, that is local bodies, to collectively exert for their legitimate role as per the Constitution. In many cases, local bodies, both rural and urban, have become an extended arm of the governments. Many scholars call it a birth defect, which probably will require a constitutional amendment. However, there is an urgent need to address many of the issues which fall under the purview of the constitutional amendments, so that all-round harmonious development of the country takes place as per the vision of Mahatma Gandhi and Baba Saheb Ambedkar, etc. Looking at these gaps, International Society for Human Awakening and Development has launched the Grassroots Democracy Project with the objective to bring the local governments and their elections to the center stage of national polity and development through workshops, webinars, research, advisory, training, etc. for the various stakeholders. I'm extremely happy that Mr. Aiyar, who was Union Cabinet Minister for Panchayati Raj during 2004 and 9, is going to share his experiences, vision, and strategies for meeting the above expectations. I myself, with my 41 years experience with local bodies in different capacities, including Chief Secretary and State Election Commissioner, I personally feel that several broad strategies are essential and which are possible within the given constitutional framework for bringing the local self-governments to the center stage of national polity. These include, according to me, capacity building of the elected representatives, alignment of state laws with the constitutional provisions for ensuring timely and free and fair elections, and devolution of 3 Fs to the local bodies. I personally feel that the recommendations of the State Finance Commission should not be only recommendatory, they should be in fact binding of the governments. Networking with national and international universities, institutions, and persons is very important for creating awareness and highlighting the issues before the decision makers. Live research, because for creation of new knowledge is very essential. There is no literature, very little literature or very little knowledge about the local governance and the dynamics of the local elections. Association of the local bodies for exerting for their rights is very important. For awareness creation, webinars like this one and creation of a YouTube channel, I think will go a long way in solving the problems of the local government. I take this opportunity to thank large number of institutions, NGOs, and individuals who have joined hands with ishad. Ishad is working with absolutely shoestring budget with no resources from any quarters in this noble and gigantic task. I am sure the views of Mr. Aiyar will not only add to our knowledge, but would also lead the policy and decision makers to take appropriate steps in strengthening the grassroots democracy. We have invited secretaries from Government of India, secretaries from the state governments, concerned secretaries, state election commissioners, academicians, research scholars, both from India and abroad, so that we can learn something today and take steps in future. With these words, I once again welcome all of you for this webinar and request Mr. Aiyar to address the participants. Thank you.
Dear Mr. Saharia, Dr. Mukulika Banerjee, Dr. Nile, and other participants in this webinar, I truly am very grateful to Ishad and particularly the Grassroots Development Project to have rescued me from obscurity and asked me to address this very important meeting. Thank you very much. I have been attempting over the last couple of days to update myself on what has been happening in Panchayati Raj, because it's now a very long time. I would say nearly 10 years since I was actively involved in trying to resolve some of the issues that were highlighted by Sri Saharia in his introductory remarks. I endorse all of them. And I would like to begin with this quotation from the annual report of the Panchayat Raj Ministry, which I think beautifully encapsulates the total confusion right at the top on what Panchayati Raj is supposed to do and how far it has achieved it. There is this lovely line in the summary that is included in the annual report, which says, please listen carefully, it appears that many states have taken steps for empowering panchayats as provided for in the constitution. But before you can even begin applauding, following the comma, the sentence reads, but the requisite powers are not available to the panchayats. So if the requisite powers are not available to the panchayats, why boast that many states have taken steps for empowering the panchayats? and adding as provided for in the Constitution. I think somewhere along the line, we have lost sight of why this step was taken back in 1989 and brought to a successful conclusion in 1992 December with the passage of the Constitution Amendment Bills, and then their notification in the Gazette of India on the 24th of April 1993, after which it became the law of the land. Now, 1993 till today is well over 25 years. And in this 25-year period, while some work has been done on Panchayati Raj, the objective of that exercise appears to have got forgotten. And so I'd like to remind this audience of why the amendments were brought in. What was the fundamental reason? What was the basic objective? I think you can find it in the speeches that Rajiv Gandhi made in the Rajya Sabha and before that in the Lok Sabha on why he had taken this initiative. For we need to be reminded that it's not a mechanical question of tinkering with the Panchayat Raj machine, but with reminding ourselves of why these steps were taken. And I cite a few lines from the peroration, first in Rajiv Gandhi's Lok Sabha speech, and then in the Rajya Sabha speech. In the Lok Sabha, he said, we must put an end to priorities being conceived far removed from realities on the ground. We must put an end to paternalistic planning. We must initiate a process of people's planning. Now, because we have forgotten that, we have several recommendations made, even in the Sumit Bose committee report, but it doesn't seem as if we are coming to any kind of conclusion. Now, why did he want this goal? Rajiv said, we trust the people. Is there any indication that what is being done now with Panchayati Raj reflects trust in the people, or does it reflect trust in joint secretaries and additional secretaries at the state level, more important than ever before, at the central level? He said, we trust the people, we have faith in the people. It is the people who must determine their own destinies and the destiny of the nation. It was for this reason that Panchayati Raj, in a constitutional shape, was introduced in the country. And I don't think it can be claimed by anybody. And to go by the annual report of the ministry, even they are not claiming this, to have been the determining factor in how we've been running Panchayati Raj for the last 5 years. He says, to the people of India, let us ensure maximum democracy and maximum devolution. Let us, what did he say? Ensure maximum democracy and maximum devolution. Let us give power to the people. And I think it is only against that litmus test as to whether the people have been empowered that one can evaluate whether the rollout of Panchayati Raj after the passage of the Constitution amendments has indeed worked or not worked. And when you have the Ministry of Panchayati Raj itself nearly 30 years after it was rolled out, say that the requisite powers are not available to the panchayats, then I don't think any further argument is required to establish that the ultimate goal has not been reached. And that is also why I think it is significant that this book, which forms the basis of the seminar we are having today, Re-Engineering Grassroots Governance, it's with a foreword by J.S. Saharia, and it's been edited by Mrudul Nile, is called re-engineering. I'm not sure that re-engineering is what we need. I think we need to recall why this whole program was started and examine the extent to which the goal is being achieved. I have the feeling that the government of India, for a long time now, certainly for the last 10 or 12 years, has been concentrating on tinkering with the machine. The more acceptable reference to that being re-engineering. We don't want re-engineering until we know why the re-engineering. If you re-engineer a motor car, it's because you can make it run more efficiently. But if you forget that the idea is to make it run more efficiently and just concentrate on the mechanics of re-engineering, then the ultimate result may not conform to what you are seeking to do. And in this connection, I have particularly been impressed by something that B. Shyam Roy has said in his essay in this book. It's the one line in the whole book that has really driven, if you like, a nail in the coffin of my hopes. For he points out that while the Constitution gives total priority to devolution as the way forward, he adds, I think with great significance, that in the Constitution, we never defined devolution. We just took it for granted that people would understand devolution to mean something distinct from decentralization. In Hindi, it was the difference between Vikendrikaran and Supurdgikaran. And I'm very grateful to Bhajan Lalji, who was then the Minister of Rural Development, and happily for me spoke very little English, that it was he who brought in this vocabulary of Supurdgikaran as against Vikendrikaran. Vikendrikaran is authorizing somebody else to undertake the authority that has been given to you. This devolution or Supurdgikaran is transferring the authority to the other entity. Now we see that there is a great deal of progress being made in Vikendrikaran, in decentralization. And how is that done? Well, in that phrase used by our chairman, Mr. Saharia, it is that there is the panchayats are functioning as did you say the long arm of government? The extended arm of government. To function as an extended arm of the state government or increasingly of the central government does not amount to devolution. We didn't think about what is the meaning of devolution or what is the mechanism for devolution back in 1989 or even on the eve of the passage of the bills, which had been remitted to a joint select committee to examine. it didn't occur to us that people would not understand what devolution meant, despite the fact that Rajiv Gandhi had actually given a definition for what is today called, particularly in Europe, the principle of subsidiarity. Under this doctrine, I'm quoting Rajiv Gandhi now. This was long before Europe discovered the word. He said in Parliament, whatever can be looked after at the lower level is looked after at that level and not remitted upstairs. Now, this is not a very elegant expression, but it sums up the essence of subsidiarity. And without subsidiarity, there can be no devolution. It amounts to decentralization, which means extending the long arm of the government into villages by converting village panchayats into agencies of implementation, not agencies that respond to the needs of the people. And to illustrate what I mean, let me take the current situation with regard to finance commissions, by which I mean Central Finance Commission grants. There has been a very considerable increase in the funds being allotted by the Finance Commission to local governments. They have now recommended that for the 5-year period, 2021-26, about 5 crore rupees, strictly if you want to know, 4 crore 36,361 crore. But let me just say 4.3 lakh crore rupees should be granted to local governments over this 5-year period. That means that it amounts to just under 1 crore per institution. And since we have about 250,000 local governments in rural India and about 5,000 more in urban India, this amounts to saying approximately 1 crore rupee over 5 years to grassroots units of local self-government. That would amount to approximately 20 lakh rupees per year, per financial year. Now, compared to what was happening earlier, this is not only a large sum of money, it's an enormous sum of money. And if they were really untied, as recommended by the Finance Commission, then you can begin to understand why so many people are so anxious to stand for positions of Sarpanch or the Taluka chief or the district chief, and why they are willing to spend as much money as they are obscenely ready to spend to get elected, because they see themselves being in charge of close to 1 crore of rupees over the next 5 years. In actual fact, they're not going to get to that figure because the grants themselves are released by the Ministry of Panchayati Raj here in Delhi. The money does not reach the bank account or the treasury account of the panchayat. That is what we always meant by the devolution of finances, that it would be there in the account for them to spend. But before it is sent to them, the Ministry of Panchayati Raj sends them a pro forma. Now, the pro forma is the conception of a joint secretary sitting in Delhi who has perhaps some experience of one state, but hardly of the country, and certainly is not an inhabitant of the village. This pro forma is then filled out at the village level, and this is called the Gram Swaraj Development Plan or some such thing. Does amounting to filling out somebody else's pro forma amount to grassroots planning? In the Rajiv Gandhi conception of people's involvement in development planning, the structure was that in areas which have been devolved to the village panchayats and the intermediate panchayats and the district panchayats, these different tasks would be looked at by the panchayat concerned in consultation with the Gram Sabha, and proposals were to be sent to the district planning committee, which would then consolidate whatever had come from below and then send it forward as a draft proposal, which the state would then integrate at the state level, and all this would go to the planning commission. Today, we don't have a planning commission, and virtually no district planning committees exist. And where they do, they are not chaired as the 64th Amendment provided, invariably by the chairman of the Zilla Parishad, and included representatives of urban agglomerations within the districts, so as to fuse urban and rural demands together, and then have it taken up through the State Planning Commission to the Central Planning Commission. That was the structure of planning envisaged. That has now been reduced to only the village level. There is no such provision for the other tiers of Panchayati Raj, although in the recommendations, which are bound to be accepted by the 15th Commission, they have said that they've made a reference, which I can't immediately find, to the 3 levels of Panchayati Raj. I think this is in response to complaints that came from the intermediate and the district panchayats about their not being involved in the grants that were coming from the Central Finance Commission. But it's not untied, because the center has decided what its priorities are for the nation as a whole. And these priorities may or may not apply to the particular village concern. The particular village concern may be more worried about too much water in the floods than it was interested in getting water for sanitation. I would imagine that most village panchayats in the Brahmaputra basin of Assam would be wanting to know how to protect themselves against annual floods in the Brahmaputra. That this might also be true of Bihar. But because the center is determining what should be the priority for everybody, for 130 crore Indians, as the Prime Minister often says, we have a situation where, in the name of decentralization, centralization has now moved from state capitals to the national capital. And it is only if you fill in your pro forma correctly, presumably by getting somebody else to come in and fill them out, that this central ministry of Panchayati Raj will even consider releasing this. And I've been told that they have been approving almost every plan. This is not a tribute to the Gram Panchayat. It is a tribute to the person who made the pro forma and is now approving a properly filled in pro forma. That was not the invention of the Gram Panchayat concerned and merely answered the questions that have been given from the center. How can this be described as either decentralized planning or devolved planning? When I was Minister of Panchayati Raj, which I admit is a long, long time ago, we got the Planning Commission to commission Mr. Ramachandran, who is a long-serving Vice President or Vice Chairman of the Kerala State Planning Commission, to draw up an entire manual for development, for district planning. Now that manual has been thrown out of the window. No similar exercise has ever been undertaken subsequently. And instead, the Ministry of Panchayati Raj tells them what to fill in and then approves of their having filled in what they told them to fill. I don't regard this as devolution. Also, to answer Mr. Shyam Roy's question or point that devolution was not defined in the Constitution, which henceforth I shall regard as the biggest lacuna in the draft that I had a hand in preparing. It was the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation's Panchayat Raj Task Force that in the course of 1993 and 1994 came up with what is now almost as a cliche used as the expression 3 Fs. It was the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, not the Ministry of Panchayati Raj or Rural Development as it was then, that thought up this definition of Panchayati Raj. And it said the 3 Fs stood for the devolution of functions. And based on that devolution of functions, the devolution of finances from the state budget and the devolution of functionaries by the state government, so that you would get genuine devolution on all 3 parameters. Now, Mr. Shyam Roy makes another very important point, which I accept humbly because it was at the heart of the report of the Aiyar Committee back in 2013, which was that you cannot devolve a subject. Now, what is given in the 11th schedule is a number of subjects. It begins with agriculture and continues to include almost anything that you would expect out of rural development in any system, and says, let us have devolution with respect to these subjects. But for instance, where it says devolution of secondary education or even primary education, how can you avoid having at least a state level discussion on what is to be the syllabus for the teaching? And at secondary school level, you'll certainly have to start thinking about exams. And there has to be some national level or state level provision of blackboards and chalk and teachers. So for us to say that devolution of a subject involves cutting off all central government involvement and all state government involvement is simply impractical. It's much better to say, let us work towards devolution in respect of the subjects that are given in the 11th schedule. I'm not dealing with the 12th because in this lecture, I don't have enough time to go into urban local government. I'm just going to talk about rural local self-government. Now here, by a process of activity mapping, you can divide up what needs to be done with respect to a particular subject at the level of the central government, of the state government, at each of the 3 tiers of local self-government, and then what is to be remitted for approval to the Gram Sabha. Unfortunately, when you undertake such activity mapping, as Mr. Roy points out, and which we did at very, very considerable length in our report, largely through the hand of Raghunandan, we found that with respect to just education, there were about 300 activities to be performed, at least 100 of which had to be done at a higher level than the panchayats. And then in salami slicing, when it comes to activities at the district, the intermediate and the village levels, these activities then get split up so much that you cannot really base devolution on activity mapping. But if you use the activity maps to more broadly define what is the role in each of these subjects of the I'm now talking about the panchayats, of the village panchayat, of the intermediate panchayat, and the district panchayat, then you may easily be able to relate the devolution of finances on the same basis. Now, unfortunately, when it came to devolution of finances, even in the most progressive states, like those of Maharashtra and Karnataka and Kerala, what do we find happens? There is a budget entry for the ministry or the department of Panchayati Raj. It's not devolution to the panchayats, it's a devolution of some money to one of the departments of government. And that department is then required to decide how it's going to distribute in a downward manner. And if that is not done scientifically, then you get a situation where the minister of Panchayati Raj at the state level is able to patronize some districts at the cost of other districts. And since the main job of a politician, and therefore of a minister, would be to boost up his own party, there would be a tendency to be discriminating if there are not criteria that are laid down and generally accepted. And when the criteria are challenged, that there should then be an effective challenge, either in the Gram Sabha or even possibly in the courts. But until that happens, you will not get a devolution of finances, which is on the same basis as the devolution of functions. And equally, it is not good enough to say on an ad hoc manner that so many officers are deputed to work with the panchayats. They don't work with the panchayats, they work over the panchayats. Because they have not been deputed to the panchayats by the panchayats. They have been deputed by the minister concerned. So every single schoolmaster does not look like this towards his students. He looks like this towards his minister. And that means that there is simply no one responsible to the community. And as far as the community is concerned, since they exist, they're given some token presence. That, okay, the sarpanch will be, or the pradhan as you call them in Maharashtra, will be a member of the school management committee. And one or two parents will be selected there. But otherwise, the membership of the school management committee is made up of those who hold the powers of patronage, even those who hold the purse strings. And since one of the first jobs of those who are holding the purse strings is to bring in NGOs, when the CAG says that money given to NGOs cannot be audited by even local audit, let alone the CAG, you actually find that the bulk of the funds are not even being audited, let alone social audit being brought to bear on them. So unless there is an integrated vision of how this devolution is to take place, there is simply no way in which the objectives that were laid out in Rajiv Gandhi's speeches, which are the only speeches made at the Prime Minister's level in Parliament, are to be achieved. His last word was, the bills are designed to entrench democracy in the very foundations of our polity. Would any objective observer say that democracy has been entrenched at the lowest levels of our polity? Indeed, this seminar would not be required at all if that objective had been attained. But it would appear from the annual reports of the Ministry of Panchayati Raj that at least since the time I left the ministry, nobody is checking on why Panchayati Raj. Why Panchayati Raj? That question is being left out. And what is happening is that whatever is there, let's see how it can function a little better in the re-engineering. How much more petrol can we give? That is the Finance Commission money. How can we make planning actually a reality? Not whether we can make it people's planning. And nobody is asking the question as to what has happened to the constitutional provisions with regard to Panchayati Raj on district planning. And where would they hold if we don't have a planning commission? And if state planning boards are getting increasingly sidelined in the states. So I could go in great detail into the recommendations of the Sumit Bose Committee, which is the most recent committee to have been set up to boost Panchayati Raj. But looking at it, I'm afraid I have a very deep sense of deja vu. It seems to me that all the recommendations that have been made in the past have been put away in dusty cupboards, and that every new committee that is established, including every new finance commission that is established, is only reinventing the wheel. We know that the wheel exists. I don't see anything in the Sumit Bose Committee which we had not done privately in the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, done in the records of the Ministry of Rural Development, done repeatedly, and with the collaboration of the states and NGOs and panchayat representatives in respect of what do you call it, improvements or re-engineering. But the basic thoughts are not focused on what is the purpose of Panchayati Raj. I'm going to stop here because I find that I have exceeded my 45 minutes.
Yes.
And we now leave it to those who wish to participate in the question and answer session. I must add that I've done more study than I was able to incorporate in this. I did not mention, although I should, I'm now going to mention it in one sentence, that Panchayati Raj has become an object for technology, not for the human touch. And what I see, I mean, it's amazing. They have a Panchayat Enterprise Suite. They have state-specific applications. They have additional ICT intervention. They have state-level master trainees. They have something called Plan Plus. They have something called Action Soft. There is also the PRIA Soft. There is area, I don't know, National Panchayat Portal, National Assets Portal, Local Government Directory, Service Plus, Training Management Portal, Geopolitical Information System. Yeah, it's all very well for those who understand the 21st century. I don't. But I think I am with the majority of those who live in the villages. The argument is made that every one of them has a smartphone in his hand. I doubt that the argument is right. But even to the extent that it is right, how computer savvy are they? And is it really a way of increasing people's participation by taking people away from Panchayati Raj and concentrating everything on technology? I've asked that question. I've also not been able to dwell on the fact that we were very worried about power being concentrated on the states. But now, over the last 5 or 6 years, or more perhaps, power is being concentrated on the center. Panchayati Raj is a state subject. But who is releasing the grants given by the Finance Commission? It's the central government. And how is it doing it? By picking up the Prime Minister's favorite schemes and saying these are essential. What you want is not essential. It's only what remains to be done. So I'm afraid we have drifted from the objectives of the Constitution. We have not converged upon them. And I now take my leave. Thank you for the attention with which you listened to me. I'm most grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I mean, we should go with. The kind of points that you have raised are really very pertinent, very important. That is, what is more important? Is it the technology or human touch? And what do the people in rural India need? What is the extent of devolution, and why devolution is not mentioned in the constitution per se? So these are some of the very important.
It is mentioned. It's not defined.
Yeah, it's not defined. Sorry. Yeah. So we need to look at some of these particular issues into more detail. But since there are a lot of people and there are a lot of questions that are coming in, first we would take up some questions, followed by that some comments, and then finally we'll have word of thanks. But I think Mr. Bhim Raskar has a couple of questions. So I request Mr. Bhim Raskar, sir, from RSCD to ask his questions, please.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Yeah, sir, I have three sets of questions. Number one is like a very important thing is that how to mobilize citizens of India to claim this space of 73rd and 74th Amendment. Only universities, NGOs, we are trying very hard, but still people, voters are not claiming this space. How to go about it? What is your experience about it? And secondly, how to re-engineer these free and fair elections with devolution of 3Fs. I think it's very important that election is a foundation, and at that level only, this devolution of 3Fs is becoming very difficult task. And I always feel that RDD, Rural Development Department, I don't think they are for devolution. So it's naturally that stakeholders and their interests, vested interests are coming in. So it's very important that how to go about this, basically to how to re-engineer free and fair elections with devolution of 3Fs. I have these two important questions, sir. Thank you.
You want me to reply now?
It's up to you, sir.
No, I think if, since these questions are so complex, it may be better to answer briefly each questioner. I am completely in agreement with Mr. Raikar that the intellectual involvement with Panchayati Raj is that of academics and retired civil servants and a few politicians and some remaining Gandhians. But apart from that, the actual interaction with the people is not adequate, with the result that the involvement of the people in this dialogue is an important missing dimension. It cannot be done except at the state and sub-state level, because nobody sitting in Delhi someone like me may know a little bit of Hindi and a little bit of Tamil, but how do I interact with Gram Panchayat people from Maharashtra or from Kerala? I'm told it was, I think you heard some of that. I've just unmuted myself. Hello?
Hello, sir. You are brief interruption. It was a very brief interruption.
Okay. So was I audible earlier?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. So then I don't have to repeat that. In the light of this, I think ultimately we'll have to rely on Bhim for Maharashtra. We'll have to rely on someone else in Himachal. We'll have to rely on someone else for Tamil Nadu. And maybe the networking could be done by your grassroots democracy project.
The session is open for questions. If anybody has questions, yeah. Please, sir. Ajit Ranade sir would like to ask question.
Yes.
So, Manishji, thank you very much for a great exposition. I know the time is short and you probably had many more things to share, especially we have to invite you, I think, later for the urban aspect. So my question is a little, give me a minute or so. It's a little complicated, but I hope you'll be able to address it. See, much of India's poverty lies in the villages. It's still confined more to rural areas. Of course, there is urban poverty. And this whole issue of decentralization, especially of devolution, means that the funds are collected from one area or one part of the economy, and they're devolved in a redistribution way. But given the mood of the economy and the economic liberalization, is the redistribution is not exactly. I think economic reformers and the so-called liberal orthodoxy is not very enthusiastic about it. So they're going to fight somewhat they're going to resist it. So it's not only the state finance commissions or the mantralayas which resist giving the funds. It's I think the orthodoxy, and on top of it, we have a centralizing tendency in the polity, in the sense we have now GST, which is kind of a one nation, one tax regime. I mean, we are not going to debate the merits of that. There is talk of one nation, one election, holding all elections simultaneously. So on one hand, there are these centralizing tendencies, and yet the spirit of the 73rd and 74th is actually in the other direction, which is decentralization, deepening and giving more power and autonomy to the lower tiers who don't have as much resources. So how do we address this dichotomy that they don't have resources, they don't have money, they don't have tax revenues, yet we want more political and administrative power to go down to the decentralized level, and mood of the nation is economic liberalization and more centralization. Don't you think this is a dichotomy?
It is. I completely agree with everything you've said, and so I don't need to comment on it any further.
No, in spite of that, we have to struggle to implement the spirit of 73rd and 74th.
Yes, but to implement the spirit or implement it in spirit, you have to remember why this whole thing was brought in. I see, for example, on the chat file that they are not using, there's one Mr. Sharma who has said, or is it a Ms. Sharma who said, the details available with Sri Mani sir is old. We are not using PES since too long. We use e-Gram Swaraj. I stand corrected, but your latest audit report, the annual report of the Panchayat Raj Ministry, goes on at great length about PES. So that is why people like me, who are not within the system, are often misled. I've also seen that the same Mr. or Ms. Sharma has said we audit too. Lots of misinformation. In fact, we are doing audit online. Now, there was a suggestion made by the Public Audit Authority under Mr. V.K. Shunglu that they had several thousands of unemployed auditors who could be assigned 10 panchayats, and every 10 days they would return to a particular panchayat to check on whether it's being done properly or not. And if you do this audit online, it may give you better results than not having audit at all, but it's not the involvement of the people, of the elected panchayat members, of the Gram Sabha in the audit process. And it does not cover social audit, which we had certainly intended to depend upon much more. So my basic answer is that these technical faults that Mr. Nagi Reddy and Mr. Ashit Sinha and Ms. Sharma and then...
So may I, sir, I am Ms. Sharma. May I add to it a bit?
Yes, of course.
Actually, yes, sir, yes, sir. Actually, thank you so much, sir. It's such an honor to talk to you. So actually, I believe that whenever we talk about development, we should leave politics behind. Instead of fighting on which government did what, because I'm not political, I am technical person, but I'm associated with Panchayati Raj since 2010. So you can understand it's not just that one type of government that I'm working into. I worked with different political governments, sir. But the thing is that the means many positive things are happening. As you told, sir, Panchayat Enterprise Suite, it was like earlier different applications. Now we have bought all the functionality under one umbrella and the data flows seamlessly. Now coming to the technology, like sir said, ki, technology, how can rural people know and not? So we have a complete, we have given them hands-on support. We have a technical person and all who will assist for all this. And whatever planning is done, sir, before that we do surveys, sir, of the GPs, and that is done by the community itself. And before like the beginning of the financial year, we do GPDP or say Panchayat development plans for the next financial year, so that we have pool of plans, activities that can be done. And not only that, sir, whenever we plan it, whatever is planned, that only is put in the software. So I think there's a lot of information that needs to be disseminated. Like you said, sir, you were not aware about it. So through my YouTube channel, actually I had worked as Chief Technical Officer in Jharkhand Police too. So through my channel, I try to disseminate information about Panchayati Raj developments and how to stay secure. So, like there are good things happening, sir. It's not that everything is bad. And one more thing, sir, everything is being imposed from center. That is also not correct, sir. The fund flows directly to the GPs and they do their own planning, and there is no compulsion that you take this plan or that plan. Yes, 50% of fund we utilize for drinking water, sanitation, and for increasing micro irrigation.
Ma'am,
That
can
is
you
only
please switch
thing,
on
sir.
your camera? Can you please switch on your camera?
Yeah, sure, sir.
Yeah, please.
Like there are good things happening, sir. It's not that everything is bad. And one more thing, sir. Everything is being imposed from center. That is also not correct, sir. The fund flows directly to the GPs and they do their own planning, and there is no compulsion that you take this plan or that plan. Yes, 50% of fund we utilize for drinking water, sanitation, and for increasing micro irrigation.
Ma'am, can you please switch on your camera? Can you please switch on your camera?
Yeah, sure, sir.
Yeah, please.
Like there are good things happening, sir. It's not that everything is bad. And one more thing, sir. Everything is being imposed. That's also not correct, sir. The fund flows directly to and they do their own planning, and there is no compulsion that you take this plan or that plan. Yes, 50% of fund we utilize for drinking water, sanitation, and for increasing micro irrigation. That's all. Yeah, sure. Like, there are good things happening, so it's not that everything is bad. And one more thing, everything is being imposed. That's also not correct, sir. The fund flows directly and they do their own planning, and there is no compulsion that you take this plan or that plan. Yes, 50% of fund utilized for drinking water, sanitation, and for increasing micro irrigation.
Buttada, so there's some problem. Can you please see what exactly is happening?
Actually, I think there is some.
Yes, sir, Honorable. If you could please mute Shri Tanyappa ji, probably his or her mic is on, and that is why the voice is echoing.
She might have kept two devices on, so the things they are getting echo.
We're fine now. Yeah.
Sir.
Yes, sir. With all due respect, we may proceed, sir.
Yes.
Mridul, can I ask one more question to Mr. Aiyar?
So please, sir, please go ahead, sir.
So Maniji, in your tenure as the minister, which state had relatively done better in terms of the making progress on the Panchayati Raj, the spirit and the letter of the law? Is there any particular state you want to mention or highlight?
There's nobody who has conformed to the spirit, but there are some who have conformed better to the letter and then used their own imagination to promote at least an acceptable form of Panchayati Raj. I would give top marks to the legislation passed recently, the Gram Swaraj and Panchayat Raj Act by Karnataka. I think in terms of the legislations, it is easily the best. Then the performance on the ground of Kerala, as also of Maharashtra and Gujarat, who are really largely sticking to the models they had evolved before the constitution amendments and have amended to the extent that they needed to, owing to the mandatory provisions of the constitution. But I would add very quickly that it seems to me that over the years, Panchayati Raj is improving everywhere. The pace is very, very different, but it is improving everywhere. And the laggards are trying to catch up, whereas those who have raced ahead are tending to stagnate. And so over a period of time, I think we can claim that the constitution amendments have made Panchayati Raj ineluctable, irreversible, and irremovable. Now, that in itself is a major achievement. But we've also had phenomenal success with women's participation. There are more women in our panchayats than elected women in our panchayats than have been elected in the rest of the world put together. Equally, our performance on reservations for the scheduled castes and their involvement is on a scale that Dr. Ambedkar would probably not have imagined possible. I think there are problems with regard to the scheduled tribes because PESA, I understand from Professor Nupur Tiwari of the Indian Institute of Public Administration, is not, that PESA Act has not received conformity legislation in almost any state of India. It's done in about 2 or 3 states. But while the scheduled tribes are still to get a fair return, everywhere else we're moving ahead. But as I said, the pace of progress is uneven. And that is why I remain, despite the corrections given to me by Ms. Sharma and others, that I'm not happy with this centralization and over-reliance on technology. I would much more prefer that state governments and district governments are given the opportunity of promoting this message among the people in their own language than technocrats sitting in Delhi and using either English or even more difficult Hindi to lecture to them. Now in Tamil Nadu, all these attempts being made to rename programs from English to Hindi, well, I don't think it works on the periphery of India. In Tamil Nadu, every single central government scheme is renamed in Tamil. And therefore, I don't know what's being achieved over here. But I expect this is so in other non-Hindi speaking states like Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Bengal. So that is not the way to go. And the implication was that I was being critical because I belong to the Congress party. There's no denying that I do, but I did try to avoid politics today. And if I haven't succeeded, well, I apologize. But my intention was not to make a political speech, because if I had made a political speech, I would have been much less restrained in my language.
Thank you. Mitul, you're on mute.
There are a few students here. If you have any questions, or maybe then we can go to some comments, maybe from Mukulika Banerjee Madam and some other scholars who are here in this particular meeting.
Yeah. Sir, I'm Sanjay Prasad. I'm State Election Commissioner for Gujarat. So I could join late because today we are having statewide elections for 81 municipalities, 31 out of 33 Zilla Panchayats, and 231 Taluka Panchayats. Now, I would just like to point out 1 or 2 things, sir, that in Gujarat, since 1949, the Bombay Provincial Municipal Corporation Act that was adopted in Gujarat from 1960 when the state was founded. And the same year, Gujarat passed the Panchayat Act and the Municipalities Act in 63. Since then, the decentralized administration has been going on in a very systematic and way with the power to the people. PESA Act also, the rules, etc. have all been notified and they are being implemented in the tribal areas. I would just like to point out, sir, one methodological issue that when we are talking about Panchayati Raj, we are always talking about Gram Panchayats. Now, Panchayati Raj in Gujarat, at least it has Gram Panchayat, then Taluka Panchayat, District Panchayat, 3 stages are there. And almost all the state functions are devolved to them. Now, if we always conceptually think of the Gram Panchayat, then we lose out on a lot of activities which require scale of activity which is bigger than the village, like water supply, road, other infrastructure projects, health, education, etc. So therefore, when we discuss Panchayati Raj, we should have a holistic and comprehensive discussion, including Gram Panchayat, Taluka Panchayat, and District Panchayat. So therefore, all the activities can be decentralized and the real power to the people at the grassroots level can be given. Otherwise, what is happening in many of the states that a lot of activities which are at a higher level than the individual village, all those are with the state agencies, and the full empowerment of the Panchayati Raj is not taking place because conceptually we only think of the Panchayat as a Gram Panchayat and not above that. So I would suggest that a more broadening of the discussion takes place, and Panchayat we think right up to the district level, so that full empowerment of the Panchayati Raj institutions can take place. Thank you, sir.
I totally agree. If you look at the constitution, it was a 3-tier system that was envisaged. There was no exclusion of the district level or the intermediate level. That came as a result of the finance commissions, I think from the 12th or so starting, having decided that their grants will only go to the Gram Panchayat. And the devolution of finances and activities to lower levels was never really brought forward as an argument for dividing it among all the 3 tiers and not just to the lowest tier. And now the 15th Finance Commission has made a reference to the need to bring in every tier into the system. But I don't know how long it will take for that to happen. I hope over the next 5 years, we will have a more holistic conception of Panchayati Raj as involving all 3 tiers, not just one tier.
I would just like to point out that, for example, in Gujarat, all the activities of education, health, agriculture, animal husbandry, all the things which affect the rural population directly are all devoluted to the Panchayat at the district Panchayat and Taluka Panchayat level. So thank you, sir. Yes.
Yeah. Could I intervene now?
Yes, sir.
Sir, I would like to place on record the wonderful contribution made by you, Mr. Aiyar, and under, of course, the glue or under the, though Rajiv Gandhi was not there by the time 73, 74th amendments came, Rajiv Gandhi, because he is the person, fountainate from where all these things came. And as a result of which today, great transformation has taken place. Maybe a little bit variation here and there. Elections are being held on time, and there is no dissolution, and there is no, magic wand removal of the local bodies. Some kind of corporal nature has come to the PRIs and the urban bodies. This is a wonderful achievement. In addition, there is also some improvement in the sense the Central Finance Commission tends to make grants to supplement the state budget. That's a very, unfortunately, the Finance Commission part, even though in fact, more number of provisions are added in the Constitution, 73, 74 amendment regarding the Finance Commission, State Finance Commission, whereas the Election Commission provisions are fewer. But unfortunately, these things are just being, copy of the Central Finance Commission provisions. There is no binding thing, like the State Election Commission is bound to hold elections. Elections have to be held on time. There is no such compulsion when it comes to the state finance commissions, that they should be appointed, that they should make recommendations, and those recommendations should be honored. There is nothing of that sort. Of course, the same things are not there for the Central Finance Commission, but by virtue of the clout of the state governments, central government tends to follow whatever are the whatever the spirit of the Central Finance Commission. But unfortunately, the state finance committee at the state level, there is no such compulsion, there is no such pressure from the local bodies, because they don't have that kind of a strong presence. So as a result of which, actually if the state finance commission's provisions are amended to make that these commissions are appointed every 5 years, and they make devolution, they make definite contribution for the devolution, this particular thing, if it comes in the constitution, then definitely local bodies in our country will transform, will become big, and will be able to play an independent role. I think this is one little thing which got missed at the time of 73rd and 74th Amendment, and there is an opportunity. Thereby there is an opportunity for action to come in and fill this gap, so that the local bodies can become, they play an active role in the world over. Actually, about 30% of the resources are spent, about 10% own resources, and 20% is the devolution all over the developed world. Nearly 30% of the resources of any government, any state, goes through the local bodies. Whereas in India, I made an estimation when I was finance secretary of Telangana state, in 2014, only 1% of the total kitty, if you say about today, maybe about 70 lakh crores or 75 lakh crores is the total budget of all the governments in this country. Only 1%, as you said, sir, about 1 lakh crores per annum is out of 75 lakh crores, only 1 lakh crores go through these local bodies, which is insignificant and which is disproportionate to the kind of functions which are laid upon them. Take care of the street lights, take care of the water, take care of the drainage, take care of the sanitation. All these things cost a lot of money. With 1% of the total revenues of a state, everything, 3 bodies put together, they will not be able to achieve this result. As a result, people have there is no consistency for the local bodies. So finance commission, state finance commission is the linchpin actually. If that is made effective, I think, because politically now 73, 74 amendments have made these local bodies as politically independent. Nobody can remove them, nobody can meddle with them, but financially they are highly exposed. Thank you.
Mukulika, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Thank you. I don't have very much to say except to just raise an issue. First, many thanks to Maniji for giving us a sense of where this has come from. There are much bigger issues of citizenship, the kind of democracy we want India to be at stake rather than any partisan politics. And I think that came through very clearly. But it does, I think, a number of the questions, and especially, what Mr. Dr. Ranade was saying, and what Mr. Reddy at the end ended with, the issue of revenue, right? The revenue collection, generation, disbursement. If the narrative of that is going to always be that one part of the population is subsidizing another part, if the perception is that rich people are paying for poor people, to put it crudely, or that somehow urban industrial India is paying for rural agricultural India, it causes a sort of complete miscommunication and misunderstanding of how these bodies could have any teeth at all. So one specific issue of why local bodies cannot raise their own tax revenue. Why is it that this dynamic of the State Finance Commission always dispersing amounts, thereby, as Maniji was telling us, that this is not, it's decentralization, it's not devolution. If your hands are tied, then you can't have any independent decision making. That's one point. The second point, to go back to what Mr. Saharia was saying at the very beginning about citizenship education, most of us Indians don't even understand our relationship or our accountability of local governments. If the sewers are blocked, which body is responsible, how much money they have, how many powers do they have, how many other bodies are they connected to. We simply don't have any understanding of how local government works. Who do you blame for the potholes on the road? Who do you blame for teachers being absent? Which part of the government of Bharat Sarkar do you hold accountable for your problem as a citizen is completely unclear. And that is, somebody was asking about how do we get citizens involved more. Well, I don't think most people, there's complete lack of, it's all, Bharat Sarkar is a very diffuse concept and we don't know who is responsible for what. So this idea of revenue generation, tax collection, and devolution of power is one, and this idea of citizenship and accountability, I think, is the other. That's all I wanted to say at this stage. Thank you.
Sanjay Srivastava ji. You are mute.
Hello.
You're on mute.
Hello.
Bhaskar ji.
Yeah. Actually, we have the State Election Commission for local governments, and it's very important that we don't have any commission for devolution. Can we suggest something like this, that there has to be a special commission to look after devolution part of the whole process? Thank you.
I think that's a very good idea.
Sanjay ji.
As a state election commissioner, when we are dealing with the local bodies, the issues, there are two parts of the problem we are having. One is the vis-a-vis our, but where we are standing. When we find that although we've got a lot of freedom to work, but our own functioning is restrained by the state government role, where always effort we have to look for the fund, we have to look for our more acceptability. So this is one part which we are dealing among ourselves in our standing committee. We are taking this issue, but the issue of devolution of fund is one of the matter where we are also concerned, because we are finding panchayati bodies are not able to work properly and effectively. The devolution is not defined anywhere, it's not working properly. This part where my predecessor have also spoken, can we have some mechanism where a devolution is issued in a particular manner? Perhaps that will be one of the things I thought I will bring to your notice for your comments.
I would like to, Mridul.
Yes, sir.
Can I say something, Mridul?
Yeah, sir. Please, sir.
So I would like to add what is being discussed. First of all, I'm thankful to Mr. Aiyar for a wonderful description of the entire issue and the comments from various participants. I look at it from a different angle. The government, which is supposed to implement these things, if they are not interested, how do we make them interested? How do we get it done? How do we ensure that the Finance Commission recommendations get binding? How do we ensure that the three tiers of the Panchayati Raj, district level, taluka level, the Gram Panchayat level, work as expected? If the government itself is not very keen, because once our Chief Minister was telling in the public meeting that Zilla Parishad people want to have all the powers which the ministers have, which the MLAs have. But once they become the MLAs, they don't want to give those powers to Zilla Parishad. MLAs want to have all the powers of the ministers. But when they become the minister, they don't want to give any power down below. So if that is the situation, I think the way forward is, we can't get the laws amended easily. Constitution amendment is extremely difficult task. We tried very hard for the last 5 years to amend some of the provisions of our state laws, and we just could not succeed. So maybe, I mean, one way out of this dilemma, maybe through the associations of the local bodies, we create pressure, we create public opinion, so that, and maybe through the judicial system, we create a pressure so that the things happen. Otherwise, nobody is willing to share the power with anybody else. And I'm finding, at least in Maharashtra, we don't have the professional associations of the local bodies. The municipal corporations, 27 municipal corporations, they don't have the association. They may be close to the CM and they may get their individual works done, but not the broader issues. So maybe, I mean, we can think on those lines also to break this impasse. I would like Mr. Aiyar to comment on that if he thinks it's worth.
So I would just like to mention that, for example, in Gujarat, the district panchayats, the presidents have an association called Panchayat Parishad, and they have elected persons and all that. So a lot of the funds for all those delegated activities, they are given to the panchayats directly by the state. And second thing is that panchayats are having their own fundraising also, taxation. Of course, it is very limited unless there is a big industry in the panchayat, is only primarily limited to the property tax. But the municipal corporations and municipalities, they have a fairly sound system of local taxation. And for the big municipal corporations like Ahmedabad, Surat, Vadodara, etc., Rajkot, they collect sizable amount as taxes, which they are using independently for their own infrastructure works, road, drainage, etc. Some of them have issued bonds also. So this way the system of taxation at the local level is okay, but depends on the sources of taxation. Unfortunately, most of the panchayats in the rural areas who are not having any big industry situated in their precincts, they have very limited and stagnant sources of taxation. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. Shall we?
Yes.
Sir? I think it's almost 5:10 and we were supposed to end this particular meeting or webinar by 5 o'clock. But this for some, just some international and final points. When we are looking at certain other indexes, say for example, multidimensional poverty index or hunger index, that are these indexes are actually looked at on a global level. Unfortunately, the percolation of these kind of indexes is not found in the local, even the urban local bodies elections also. So maybe, there will be a time when the local bodies, including the urban and the rural, will take the cognizance of some of these particular indexes, which are really, really, looking at public welfare. And maybe tomorrow, a policy which has a lot more emphasis on social policy than an economic policy will come in, which will be just opposed against the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment, through which some kind of percolation of all these three Fs will be may be possible. I cannot say will be possible, may be possible. We should end this with an optimistic note. I profusely thank our today's guest, Honorable Manishankar Aiyar sir, all the other election commissioners who were present over here today, Dr. Mukulika Banerjee, Professor Mukulika Banerjee, Ajit Ranade sir, Bhim Raskar sir, and all those who had contributed to a thought-provoking and some kind of new things, I'm sure, will emerge out of these kind of deliberations. I once again thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Just before we leave one last, since we are having elections right now, and I would just like to point out, it's a pointer, that the vote participation in the elections for the local bodies, for the self-governance bodies, is about 15 to 20% more than that of the Vidhan Sabha and Parliament. That just shows the enthusiasm of the people for the self-governance bodies and the fact that they are participating much more actively in the self-governance bodies than in the routinized institutions of governance as we understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir,
Yeah. Sorry.
It's a very great pleasure for me to have to thanks everyone. It's a ishad project. We started grassroots democracy project and a national webinar series. Out of that one, now we are structuring the things very nicely, and this is one of the very great event which is added today. I am very much thankful to Honorable former Union Cabinet Minister shankar Aiyar ji to speak on the strategies to meet expectations of 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment. He focused on devolution of 3Fs and given a very good guidance to everyone, and everyone got a very good benefit of his knowledge. I am very much thankful to Sanjay Srivastava sir, Sanjay Prasad sir, Naga Reddy sir, and other state election commissioner of all the states of India. And this activity, which is initiated by Saharia sir, who is very enthusiastic and who guided me as a technical person to develop some technology for state election commission for 5 years. Now it is getting used in Maharashtra continuously for next term also. Even Sanjay Prasad sir also agreed to take the initiative for our activity of True Voter in Gujarat, starting from Gandhinagar elections. And I am thankful to Mukulika Banerjee madam, Ajit Ranade sir, Bhim Raskar sir, and also thankful to the Mrudul Nide sir to monitor the event. And thanking you everyone. I, with the permission of chair, I declare that the program is over. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.